my first question is going to be to Graham. You've heard Graham, he's our researcher at Liberty. And I guess, Graham, the question is, now that we know a little bit more about the market that we're working with, let's look at how we're finding ways to reach them with products that are meaningful, that will help them to set up financially to be strong. And if we take a bit of an insight from Klaus Schwab, founder of executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, he says, being the older generation, must hear and act upon insights of young people in order to survive and thrive. Often we would say, those of us that are in a similar position to me, when I was young, this is how it worked. When I say that to my kids, they like shut down and they don't listen any further. So, famous words, hear and act upon the insights of young people in order to survive and thrive. Graham, with this context of the youth market that I have just described, can you sort of paint a picture about what the current financial environment looks like through the eyes of the youth?
Yeah, thanks, Johan. We typically try and track a whole host of behaviors and movements in this segment. We go as wide as even looking at what the World Economic Forum put together. They call it the Davos Lab. It's 14,000 young global shapers under the age of 30, and they kind of almost feed to us into the world. What are the things they're looking for from our industry, and particularly from people in general who are investors, businesses out there. And the 5 things that they were largely focused on was sustainability and conscious consumerism. This idea of the fact that we also want all stakeholders to understand, we want them to take action, to be aware of what the impact will be if they get it wrong. So this is our future. If you don't get it right now, it's going to have an impact on us. You're not going to be around. So it's almost as if we, instead of having just us telling them what's going to and shaping it, they want to be part of the shaping of the future, which I think is important. They speak about digital equality and digital access. For them, adoption is not an issue. They adopted digital. It's access to digital that's critical. They're saying in some places, just the cost of data makes it impossible for us to actually get access to anything. And what technology does, it puts knowledge and power in the hands of the person that holds it, directly to the person that holds it. It's individualized and personalized. It's not like a message that goes on TV and if you've missed it, you've missed it. You can go back and you can read it again. The other one was they're concerned about the future of democracy, political instability. I mean, we've seen what's happened around the world recently. And this is their world, of their future world. And they're saying, but these guys are making decisions and putting in place things which are going to impact us. So we have to stand up and say something about that. They're addressing inequality, and they're talking inequality across the spectrum. Income inequality, education, skills. It's becoming a challenge. And then lastly, they were talking about youth unemployment. Big issue for them. Okay, so the skills of today, are they relevant for tomorrow? And that's the challenge at the moment that they're asking. So Johan, that's it. In terms of what is bothering them, this is a massive group of 14,000 young people across the world who are saying, hear our voices.
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes sense. And I guess the next question, that begs the next question is, if we know those are the concerns, as a financial services industry, what are we doing about that?
Yeah.
Are we doing anything about it?
And that's the thing. I mean, you can't sit back and not do anything about it. And so if you just look at what's happened recently with environmental shifts and changes in this country, let's talk climate change only. Let's talk about the floods in KZN, the floods in Cape Town. And what we do at its base and core as a financial services industry is manage risk. We manage risk and we price that risk. So we are creating an awareness through this. I mean, the pandemic alone, the amount of people that have passed on and how we as an industry have paid out and supported people through that. A massive safety net that would have been a burden on government, and we believe we need to be there for them during that very, very difficult moments. So understanding risk, making them aware of why we're here and why it's important that you actually protect yourself against risk is critical. The other thing that I think is around technology particularly is that it gives us the ability to take literacy to them. I can take financial literacy now to every single child. And I think I wanted to mention here that, we sponsor the Mind My Money app. The Mind My Money app is, you can put it and you can actually guide you today from young to people much older who battle with this. So the idea here is to put the power in the person's hands. The Liberty Learn channel that was launched this year, which is the ability, some of you might have heard of, remember the William Smith with these maths classes on TV. We've gone back to that because we realize that we need to empower and educate people to actually manage a household budget. Is maths lit? And I make this point, we put a lot of emphasis on math, science and English in this country because we want to equip people. But financial literacy of how to manage a household budget is probably just as important. And do we teach young people to manage that household budget? Sorry, Johan, I get a little bit emotional and caught up in this. It's quite a big passion of mine. And then, of course, we speak about, political instability is a difficult one. But what you have more and more around the world is the ability to actually offer options which are not geographically limited. You are now able to offer offshore options. You're able to put people in different spaces and give them opportunities to actually access other things beyond just where they find themselves. If you were to go back 10, even 100 years ago, if you were born in a place, you die in a place, and that's all you know. Now you know so much more. And that's what we give. And then the other thing, of course, is just around the financial service sector to a large extent should be enabling people and not penalizing them. And I've had this debate along quite a while about the credit score that you have as an individual and how that credit score can work for you and against you. But the challenge is that you start off almost building that over time, right? And if it works against you, you start asking, but why? So how do you manage people to actually understand what that means in their world rather than penalize them, and supporting them to understand why it's important to manage your money properly, what that means for you in terms of building a future of getting access to credit and not just debt, not just piling on the debt. Okay. So businesses, we as an industry, we need to make sure that we empower them to understand how to build credit and how to actually access credit and how to build that credit score over time. For me, it's a big thing. They just land in it, Johan. No one guides them. Okay.
It's fundamental. Financial education, as you talk about math lit versus math science. I often get asked the question by young kids, so do you still use your maths? Yeah. Or your science for that matter. Not an easy one to answer, but I dream up an answer because I guess it's more than just 1 + 1 is 2. And for me, having said that, one of the wonders of the world is compound interest.
Sure.
It's really something that when people understand that, they will all start to save as early as possible, and parents will start to save for their kids as soon as possible.
Yes.
And actually not withdraw the money until they really need it. But with a generation that is instant in their need for gratification, I guess it started with a microwave, and then we had, something else, and these days you have the air fryer, which is the latest and the greatest, and it can make the best chips and chops and so forth. How do you help them understand that start early, because that seventh wonder of the world, the compound interest, is really going to benefit you in the long term, from an investment perspective?
Yeah, I think that's such a valid point, and maybe a fact for the audience. Any baby born today has got an average mortality of 140 years, and the youth, so 36 and below, could potentially live to more than 100, and that is the world average. Our risk person here is nodding. And so as we move into what we're calling the human economy, I think the reality of the opportunity of being able to live longer is great, but that presents massive risk. And so one of the things that I think is critical for our youth to understand is the balancing act between what you save and use for today versus what you need to save for the future. There's massive opportunities. I mean, everywhere you go, there's an app that tells you that you can save. And there are complicated things. There's, for people that are not in the industry, that don't talk, financial services every day, there's tax-free savings, there's retirement annuities, there's platform investing, there's stock trading, there's forex trading. There's a whole lot of things that are complex, and there's many opportunities, but it definitely needs an element of guidance, and I think, Graham, you picked on it. There are massive anxieties, for our youth that potentially is a lot larger than what we would have experienced back then. There's also massive opportunities, but helping our youth understand those opportunities, leverage those opportunities, and make the right decisions is really important. And I think it comes down to two fundamental points: is you've got to start early. You've got to start saving early. I think we all know that there's this beauty of compound interest that will only help you the longer you save. But there's also the element of guidance. It's complex. It's really difficult for youth to make decisions on really big things that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives. And this is where financial literacy and our financial advisors definitely should and could be playing a bigger role in helping the youth.
So the advice and financial literacy is one part, so let's say people understand that. If we then say, okay, now people have the want and the need and they want to act, how do we again fulfill, and how do we develop certain solutions that will actually talk to the youth versus the stock standard retirement annuity or savings plan or whatever the case may be?
No, absolutely. I think the youth of today, quite an interesting fact, and I see a lot of our banking colleagues here, a lot of your affluent youth, by way of example, have side hustles. So your private banking clients, a very big percentage of them will have a primary income, but they will also have some kind of passive income source. They are going to require solutions that talk to them in their realities, meeting them in their realities, speaking the language that they understand, working with them and understanding the unique circumstances that youth face today that are primarily different. I mean, in the investment market, we speak about black swans. I mean, who would have thought that you would have a war in the 21st century, but here we are. And so these are massive uncertainties. They impact our economy, they impact the global economy. So we've got to meet the youth in their realities. And I think, Graham, you picked on it as well. These are global citizens. A very large percentage of youth that are studying, that have qualified and that are looking to second qualifications are going global. There's a host, it's about 12% of our working population in the youth sector actually are starting semigration, which is working locally but also working offshore. So access to global platforms, understanding that you need diversification globally, very, very big thematic. And so those are some of the things that we could be doing, Johan, to talk to the youth in their reality and reach them in their current circumstances.
We'll come back to some of that a little bit later.
No worries.
But, you mentioned something earlier around people are going to live much longer.
Yes.
So I think the average, Tom, you would know this, you're the life actuary at Liberty. I think the average life expectancy of a male and a female in South Africa roughly between, let's call it 70 at the moment. When you talk about living 30 years longer, that's obviously, we have a pension problem.
Yes.
But you also have an annuity problem there, because if we pay annuities thinking people are going to die at 70 and they live until 100, that also means that everything is changing. And a couple of years ago, we were in London, and Linda Grattan, who's written a couple of books on longevity, has spoken to us, and it was so interesting to listen to her and what we solve for across the world. In sort of the 1920s, coming out of the World War I, we were solving for child diseases, chicken pox and I don't know, all sorts of funny diseases that will kill wholesale nations. In the 50s, we solved for middle-aged diseases. That's heart attacks and cancers and so forth. And now we try to solve for people, aging. And it's not the fact that you're not going to live until 100. It's how you're going to live until 100. Yeah. That's going to become really, really important. So I guess, thinking about the risk market, Tom, there's, and let's face it, when you're 25, you don't think you're going to die. You don't think about retirement, that you're ever going to retire. You just want, you're living from Friday to Friday, okay, and weekend to weekend, and Instagram posts and so forth. So what, just talk to us about how we're thinking about the youth market and the risk market.
I think it's quite an interesting space. I think the youth market, and just to highlight, Johan, maybe perhaps your age, they're thinking Thursday to Thursday. Let's be honest. Friday is part of it, but the youth market, very diverse. I mean, especially in South Africa, you've got a huge amount of different individuals. They're coming into adulthood and they're trying to differentiate themselves. They're trying to make their mark in the world, and they've got different needs. They've got different things that they find important. You've got the one who's very much, I'm going to get married, have children before I'm 30. That is what I want. That is what the family wants. And then you got another one who's like, I'm never getting married. I never want to have children. That sounds like an absolute disaster. And you've got to balance these different needs, because if you speak to your different generations and you think back, the old generations probably just did what they were told. Someone said, you need this, sign here. Do this, sign here. Everyone did. This generation asks why. They ask why. We've got access to information. They want to get more information. So we've got to be a lot more cognizant of meeting sort of their needs. You've got to understand their affordability. If Thursday, Friday, Saturday is important to them, just cutting back on Sundays party might be a solution, but you've got to reason with them. You've got to be able to talk to them in their own reality. And that's all very different. And let's be honest, life insurance, not top of everyone's mind. Investments is a lot more natural. You can think about growing your wealth. I want to be that. I want to have that holiday home. I want to sit on that yacht at some point. But not many people naturally think about, what if something happens to put that at risk? What do I need for that? And do I need life insurance? Do I need critical illness cover? And I think that's where that financial literacy conversation comes in, and it's so important, because you have a generation that's always known digital. They've always had information at their fingertips. They'll navigate to the right source of information a lot faster than myself, than anyone around here. So you've got to be able to know what you're doing, and you've got to be able to explain to them the reason, and then pull it all together in their own reality.
I think we know that, so it's not easy to achieve. I mean, the fundamental questions about life hasn't changed. So you can die too soon, you can become disabled, you have big medical expenses, or you live too long. Those are the harsh realities of financial planning. How much change is needed when we address this market in order to achieve savvy financial outcomes?
I think there's a huge amount of change, but also not a lot. I think life insurance products as they are today haven't changed a lot. I think South Africa is also probably quite a pioneer in leading life insurance products around the world. It's not that we're looking at Australia and England and saying, well, wish we could do that. I think we, at the front, we've got products that work, the structures work. I think it's about how do we get greater take-up, because if you think of the insurance gap across South Africa, it is huge. We haven't solved that. It seems to be ballooning every single time they release that 3-year study. So it is getting bigger and bigger. So we haven't solved that. How do we make sure that we can educate and articulate that uncertain events need an element of certainty, and that's effectively what life insurance covers. It gives you that ability to say, I don't know if something will happen to me. I don't know if when that will happen, but I know that something is there to protect that, and it's not left to me. But I think until we're able to bridge that gap we will just have a ballooning gap. I think if I speak to my dad, then he says, back in my day, I didn't know anything about financial products. He still doesn't, it seems. But I think we run the risk that if we don't manage to infiltrate into the youth, we end up with a bigger problem if you think of the longevity and all of that culminating, and then it's a problem in 40, 50 years.
One of the ways to get the youngsters to sit up and listen, Graham, is through marketing.
Yeah.
How should we change our marketing, our ads, our radio ads, and digital marketing to draw attention?
Yeah, interesting that I'm being asked this question as well. So as a researcher, we morph into being older and younger and being everything else. And here the big thing is don't push your product. Don't for a minute think, you can just say this is what's available. They want to understand, they want to be heard. So we spoke about the fact that the product hasn't changed much over many years, but you want to have a situation where you at least create a platform for engagement. Build it with them. Get them to understand what you're building. Make them part of the build and make it very relevant for them. And we were talking about how transparent it needs to be. I mean, if I were to ask any of you even today, I mean, maybe I shouldn't put it to an industry, on some fees of some of the stuff that you're paying, it becomes a bit of I don't really know how they get there. And a lot of these people are actually, the young people are asking, but what am I paying for? And I mean, the rise of some areas where people are clear and transparent about what they're buying is very big for this audience. They're always on, and that's the thing. I mean, if it's not an Insta, it didn't happen, right? So you are constantly being judged by a whole group of peers that they have. They literally share information continuously, and not just with people even in the room, like we would sit and have conversations with our friends. It could be people across the world that they're sharing information with. So be careful what you put out there. Right? So it makes it difficult for them to listen to one voice of reason, like an advisor. Why you? When I have access to so much more, I know more. And so the challenge here is to make sure that you're relevant, you're transparent, you build trust, and you show up and demonstrate, evidence the value that you've created. If you don't evidence it here, they're going to say, but let's just talk. Talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like Andre Pollard now. There's 3 minutes left and I have a long shot. But I want to ask each one of our panelists. Okay, so a lot of the youngsters want to do things themselves. They buy their own food on online. They share cars and so forth. But it's very difficult to do that with financial services because, again, behavioral finance tells us even if you want to, you get into the online stuff and it's so complicated that evidently you then end up doing nothing. So starting with you, Graham, from a marketing perspective, will we get it right? Then, for me, the DIY investments, will it happen or should there be augmented advice? And then Tom, from a life insurance perspective, is it ever going to happen?
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, it's going to be hard. I mean, you got to be there in their world. And I make the point that how often do you find a financial services company having a conversation in a pub about where things are going, about the world and how important it is that you actually make the right choices early in your life. So it's a shift that needs to happen, and online presents that opportunity for us, the opportunity to have personal conversations with people. And so the idea behind leveraging AI and all of that is fantastic, but you still need, at the end of the day, to talk to someone who's experienced, who knows what happens, who's got years and years. And I often make the point, I want to speak, and that's why we listen to the Warren Buffetts and the people that have made money, right? We want to know, how did you make that money, right? And you want to see people who evidence and live it. But if you don't have a situation where you understand these people and how they interpret and listen and how relevant you are to them, you're going to lose them up front.
Hamida?
Yeah, I mean, Johan, I think we are definitely moving into more technology. DIY investments is already happening. And there are various iterations of what we would determine as augmented advice. But just to test the audience, if you're dealing with your money and something goes wrong, would you like to speak to a chatbot or would you like to speak to a human being? There we go. And so in the investment arena, we absolutely think that there's place for DIY, but it will never replace the human being. We are moving into a human economy that is enabled by AI and technology, but the complexity required and the caliber and the knowledge required to actually help you navigate through a financial plan can never be replaced by AI and technology because of the bespoke needs of every single individual. And so we see this absolutely enhancing our profession, absolutely enhancing investments, but certainly not replacing the human being.
Tom?
Yeah, and I think for me to sort of took the words right out of my mouth around the bots. I think financial advice is so complex. The life insurance side, the investment side, all come together and it's complex. An advisor is able to sit and speak through a client's specific circumstances and how those two pieces like come together. No one wakes up wanting to buy life insurance. No one sits in the shower and says, today on my to-do list will be life insurance. I'm going to tick that box. And it's definitely not like a career goal. But a human interaction can bridge that gap. They've got that experience. They've seen other clients go through an event that you're trying to protect against. And that's where I think that human interaction is so valuable. But I do think there's huge opportunity if technology can support that.
So use technology and then listen to this market. Don't tell them what to do, listen to their market, guide them, and at the end of the day, we need to liberate them, because liberating them means that we're going to liberate South Africa, and therefore, that's what we do at Liberty. It's not just our name, it's what we do. Thank you very much.
TM Global Media, going beyond borders.